From Disneyland Railroad to Big Thunder Mountain, trains have always had a special place at Disneyland Paris. This is hardly surprising when you consider that they held a special place in Walt Disney's life and in the creation of Disneyland. For Walt Disney, railways are above all a family affair. During his youth, his father, Elias Disney, was a machinist in a railway maintenance workshop, then a carpenter during the construction of the Union Pacific Railway line linking Ellis, Kansas to Denver, Colorado, where he crossed paths with a certain Buffalo Bill. The small town of Marceline, where the Disney family settled in 1906, owes its existence and growth to the Santa Fe line, which then linked Fort Madison to Kansas City, a story not unlike that of Main Street, USA, and upon which his uncle, Mike Martin, worked as a mechanic. Between trips, he used to tell young Walt about the history of the railroad, especially that of Casey Jones, the exemplary locomotive engineer who saved all of his passengers from a terrible train collision in 1900. It was from this story that Walt created the character Casey Jr. and the short film The Brave Engineer, released in 1950. In 1917, Walt himself worked as a news butcher on several train lines, selling magazines, fruit, candy, and other beverages to passengers. This experience greatly enhanced his experience and imagination, while learning the basics of his uncle's trade and discovering no less than half a dozen U.S. states. He used these memories in several of his films, such as Mickey's Choo Choo, Dumbo in 1941, Danny, So Dear to My Heart in 1948, and The Great Locomotive Chase in 1956. Walt shared his passion with several studio members, including legendary animator Ward Kimball, with whom he traveled more than halfway across America to visit the Chicago Railway Show in 1948. There was also animator Ollie Johnston and machinist Roger E. Brogy, who accompanied Walt in designing Carrollwood Pacific, the model train he had built on his Holmby Hills property, pre-designing what would be the Disneyland Railroad in Anaheim 5 years later.
Ever since 1955, when Disneyland Resort was built, steam trains have become an icon of Disney parks around the world. On the one hand, found on Main Street, their point of departure, they contribute to the nostalgia so dear to Walt, and on the other, they offer an overview of the park circling around it, thereby defining the boundaries of the dream. It was therefore natural that Disneyland Paris should have its own Disneyland Railroad.
And no smoking, please. We're now on our way to the Great American West. In just a few moments, we'll be passing through that wonderland of nature's own design, the Grand Canyon.
To design it, Imagineer Eddie Sotto followed in Walt Disney's footsteps, visiting the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn that Walt himself had visited during his 1948 stay in Chicago, as well as the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento and the Travel Town Museum in Los Angeles.
This is the legendary American West, where the rivers still run free, and anyone's dream can turn to gold.
The 4 trains at Disneyland Paris were designed from the original Disneyland model, the CK Holiday. We know, due to the many references and information collected by the Imagineer during these visits, that the trains were remodeled and adapted to the specific needs and history of our European park.
So I don't know the word, but something like a fireplace. Est-ce que tu peux ouvrir le... So it's a real steam train, but instead of charcoal, we use diesel. But it works exactly the same. Vails are at the same place. It's a replica, half size. Normally you have to imagine a train twice bigger. But... Hop, est-ce que tu peux me montrer alors, les freins? Pneumatical brakes works with the steam into the engine. C'est bon. And my colleague control the pressure of the engine. The water pump to put water inside, to put the water inside the engine. Cylinder. And the compressor.
Each train consists of a 440 American locomotive, a tender, a special wagon containing the water and fuel needed to operate the engine, and 5 wagons, each one able to accommodate about 50 people. For the interior of the wagons, Imagineer Tony Baxter had the idea of arranging the benches in a U-shape, looking out on the side of the wagon and not one behind the other, as is the case in other Disney parks. This allows passengers to better appreciate the view, be it the different Disneyland Paris lands or the Grand Canyon, which we will get to later. The Grand Canyon diorama was inspired by both the Oscar-winning 1958 Disney short film Grand Canyon and the diorama built the same year at Disneyland Resort. The Imagineers in charge of the project for Disneyland Paris, under the direction of Jeff Burke, visited the backstage when they went to see the original plans of the American model there. To create the diorama, they also used the music common to both the film and the attraction, the Grand Canyon Suite by American composer Ferde Grofe, 1892 to 1972. More specifically, they used the segment On the Trail, performed by the Gronchi Symphony Orchestra, now known as the Munich Symphony Orchestra, which had also recorded the music for the Peter and the Wolf segment of the Music Box, 1946.
You could even see the remains of one of the ancient dinosaurs in the rocks. And if you look over there to the other direction, you can see a
Following our drive along the breathtaking scenery of Rivers of the Far West, here we take a pause at Frontierland Depot. As the name suggests, the Frontierland stop is not a train station, per se. It is a depot where trains can stop to refuel and restock on water, thanks to its water tower with a capacity of over 7,000 liters, enough to provide steam for 3 laps around the park. Frontierland Depot is conveniently located on the edge of Cottonwood Creek Ranch. At the time of construction in 1865, its location facilitated cattle movement from the barn to the cattle cars. Today, the Disneyland Railroad carries only passengers, but the old Critter Corral and barn-shaped Cowboy Cookout barbecue restaurant visible beyond the station are reminders of its original function.
Are you safety? Stay seated.
We now travel through the lush jungle of Adventureland, just behind Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril. To recreate this exotic environment, Imagineers worked closely with Bill Evans, the gardener who designed all Disneyland Resort landscapes for Walt Disney. Together, they recreated these humid tropical jungles, similar to those in mysterious India, using bamboo of different varieties and sizes. We then enter a tunnel overlooking Pirates of the Caribbean, next to the secret cave which leads to the treasure. Imagineer Chris Teets made sure that from this vantage point, Disneyland Railroad travelers are able to get a glimpse of the setting without being seen by the attraction's guests. They're able to peek out and see Barbossa and Captain Jack, all so discreetly, their only witnesses being a few friendly skeletons beside the train. Once we leave the tunnel, we immediately see Fantasyland Station, dominated by its elegant clock in the spirit of the stations from years gone by. Its Victorian-inspired architecture reminds us that we are just behind the Meet Mickey Mouse Theatre, in the British part of the land between Toad Hall Restaurant and Alice's Curious Labyrinth. Yet with its pinkish tones, its proportions, and its curves, bringing a touch of fantasy worthy of a cartoon. We are indeed in Fantasyland.
Actuellement la gare de Fantasyland. Sécurité à la Merci de bien vouloir rester assis. Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, we are leaving Fantasyland Station. For your safety.
It's time to leave and enjoy a unique view of the land, with the old mill on one side and Storybook Land on the other. We then arrive at It's a Small World, where the train passes just behind the clock tower, inspired by the original one at Disneyland Resort, created by legendary Imagineer Mary Blair. This route allows guests to get up close to the attraction's extraordinary facade and really appreciate its many details and decorations. Guests arriving from Discoveryland access Discoveryland Station via a richly decorated portal flanked by 2 columns topped with golden metal globes, reminiscent of the armillary sphere that dominates the land's entrance. A ramp leads to the station's platform, where one can admire a breathtaking view of the land, and in particular the impressive X-wing overhanging the starport. As we set off, the music playing in the trains is none other than the Visionarium soundtrack, one of Discoveryland's emblematic attractions between 1992 and 2004. Performed by the prestigious Sinfonia of London, it is the work of composer Bruce Broughton. Honey, I Shrunk the Audience, Silverado. Its grandiose orchestration is based on film's great classics, giving the spirit of discovery a timeless dimension. It is now time to return to Main Street Station. Our journey aboard the Disneyland Railroad has come to an end, but it's not yet the end of the journey for rail enthusiasts. Disneyland Paris has many other trains, starting with Big Thunder Mountain, speeding downhill through the famous Thunder Mesa Mine. In Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril, an incredible railroad system winds through the ruins built by Dr. Arnold, Dr. Jones's prominent colleague, to help extract precious archaeological material from the site. Let's not forget Casey Jr., the little circus train which the Disneyland Railroad greets with a whistle when it passes through Fantasyland. Plus, there's Hyperspace Mountain's famous rocket trains, whose many decorative details, components, sun and stars recall those of the Columbiad. Even the goddess Diana, represented on the harnesses, is part of the journey. The most observant remember the flying train that appeared at the very beginning of the pre-show film for the attraction Armageddon Special Effects 2002 to 2019 in Walt Disney Studios Park. It was in fact an excerpt from George Méliès' film Journey Through the Impossible, 1904, inspired by Jules Verne's play by the same name. Its design evokes Albert Robita's flying machines, the very artist who inspired Discovery Arcade's retro-futuristic posters.
We hope you enjoyed the video about the steam trains at Disneyland Paris. Give this video a thumbs up and see you again in another DLRP Fans video. Also, don't forget to watch our other videos about Disneyland Paris.